All right, 1 minute till 2 o'clock. So thank you for being here, everyone. I still see some folks that are slowly coming in. We also have a Zoom meeting going on, so people are tuning in virtually too. We know that this is a very important topic in Brisbane and has been for some time, but many of you can see that it's become an increased problem with coyotes roaming. And so we want to bring in the experts. And we are really pleased today to have Sarah Killingsworth with Project Coyote and also Ashley Kinney with the Peninsula Humane Society. And before I let Sarah come over to talk, we do have questions that you could submit. We had a Google form that is, we have a question there, but after their presentations, think of your questions, and there's time afterwards for the two of them to answer them together. So without further ado, Sarah Killingsworth.
Great, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Microphones are not my favorite thing. Okay, so I am here to talk about coyotes, and let's see if I get this. So coyotes have been in California for a long, long time, and I understand that the concern here is the increase in coyotes in the sort of urban, suburban areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about coyotes generally, about what they need to survive, and what we can do to coexist and to reduce the chance of having coyote conflict. So as we get started, I really want to encourage all of you to think about what traits and behaviors come to mind when you think about coyotes. Like, what do they remind you of? What do you think about their behavior? I also want you to look a little bit into the pictures and notice things about the animals themselves. And then raise your hand if you've seen a coyote in your neighborhood. Yeah, so pretty much almost everybody. Okay, so this is a coyote, also known as Canis latrans, and you can see the large ears, pointed nose, and those are things that help it hunt and find food, primarily by scent and by sound. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read all the facts about coyotes, but I will say that one of the things that's important to know when we talk about coexistence is how high they can jump, because sometimes the solution is a fence. And so it really needs to be 8 feet tall and potentially have outward facing slopes or rollers on the top. And we can talk more about that. At the end of the day, though, the coyote is a lot like a human in what they're looking for. What they need is food, water, shelter, and a place to raise their young. And if they find those things, they're likely to stay if there's not already a coyote there. And so urban and suburban areas, if they provide those things, become appealing habitat for coyotes. And so when we talk about coexistence and reducing coyote populations, reducing the availability of those things they are looking for is a key element of that coexistence strategy. In addition, for coyotes, survival depends on not getting hit by cars, not consuming rodents that have been poisoned, and other things that can impede their health or kill them in urban and suburban areas. Coyote pups, these are coyote pups. How many of you have seen a coyote pup? Anyone? Live in the flesh? Yeah, super cute. Coyotes use a variety of things for den. Just like we want to protect our young, they want to protect their young. And so they're looking for cover, for holes in the ground. They will reuse burrows made by badgers. They can dig their own holes. They will den under stumps, under rocky outcroppings, and also in dense brush. So one thing you can do to reduce the opportunity of coyotes denning in your neighborhood or your yard is to trim the brush off the ground so there's not a hidden space where they can hide themselves or their pups. We got a question in the Google form about hazing, so I just want to talk about that really quickly. So denning season, it varies a little bit based on weather and location, but generally is considered to be March through August here in the Bay Area. And during denning season, a coyote, if you get close to their young, may very well decide to do what we call escorting, which is to walk and make sure that you are leaving the area. So they're not following you exactly, and they're not stalking you. But like any protective parent, they're making sure that you leave and you leave their babies alone. So when we talk about hazing coyotes, it's important to know that hazing won't work if you're in the vicinity of a den, because they're going to prioritize protecting those pups and they're going to stand their ground and not move. So coyotes do reuse den sites if they've been successful den sites. And so if you have a place that you know is a den site and there is a coyote that is near you, it is better to simply walk away and not ever run, but just walk away from it. If it's not a den site, or you don't know if it's a den site, when you haze a coyote depends on whether it's approaching you. And seeing a coyote from me to the doors to this room is not a coyote approaching you, right? It may be tolerant of humans at that distance, but it's not approaching you. If a coyote gets as close to me as this front row of chairs, I'm going to haze it, right? If it's looking at me and paying attention to me. So I will clap, make my hands over my head large, stomp, discourage it from coming any closer to me. Coyotes that approach humans have most often been fed by somebody. And so feeding increases the chance of human-wildlife conflict with pretty much any species, but especially with coyotes, it's the source of a lot of the issues that we have, because they associate people with food and they then approach people trying to get food. Another thing really quickly about dogs on leash, it's my understanding that here in Brisbane, you need to have a dog on leash everywhere except the dog parks. And it's super important, again, with coexistence and coyotes, to minimize the chance of you or your dog being injured, to make sure you have a dog on leash, especially in the vicinity of coyotes. That's another coyote pup. So coyotes prefer their traditional food sources, which are going to be rodents and rabbits. They are predators. They do great work as controlling rodents. But they're opportunistic and adaptable and very smart. And for any wild animal, survival is about energy output and consuming energy back in. And so the easier the food source is for them to get, they'll default to that. So one of the ways that we end up with a lot of conflict, again, with a lot of other species as well, but particularly coyotes, is making food available to them, making our neighborhoods attractive to them because we have, quote, easy food. So urban coyotes exist throughout this entire country. So they're in Chicago, they're in Texas, they're here in California. In Chicago, garbage, which is a human-associated food, was just 2% of the diet, and domestic cat was just 1%. They're currently studying San Francisco coyotes and their diet. There's a woman at UC Davis currently doing that study, and we don't have the results yet, but it looks like they're consuming higher levels of food-related sources like garbage here in the Bay Area. And so when we talk about wildlife and food, there's two ways that a coyote could get food from your neighborhood. One is unintentional feeding. Unintentional feeding is things like unsecured garbage, compost piles that are unsecured, right? So they can come through and pick up what they think is a buffet as they walk. Pet food and water are other things that if they're left outside look like potential food and water sources for the coyote as well. Fallen fruit from fruit trees is another one. So if you have a garden area and you're leaving things out that are edible, they are primarily carnivores, but they are omnivorous and they will eat fruit, berries, all sorts of things. And then the next piece of it that's a big problem is intentional feeding. And if I could have people take away one thing from every talk I do, it's please don't feed wildlife. Don't ever feed wildlife. Aside from your like backyard bird feeders, please don't feed wildlife. It ends badly. There's a saying, a fed coyote is a dead coyote. And a coyote that interacts with a human that breaks the skin has to be tested for rabies. The only way they can do that is to euthanize the animal. So coyotes that become acclimated to humans and approach humans for food and behave aggressively are very often euthanized. So if you see an animal that needs help, Ashley's going to talk a little bit more about from the Humane Society perspective, but please don't ever feed a coyote. And intentional feeding is illegal. Let's see if I can get this. Uh-oh, it was working. There we go. So this is what they prefer to eat, right? And most people gophers live underground, so that's what a gopher looks like if you haven't seen one, but that's how they tend to hunt. They hunt individually with nosedives. Thank you. And I can't make this go forward anymore. There we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, population size is going to be determined by the availability of food. If they don't have food, they won't stay. So coyotes live in small packs. Typically, it's one nuclear family with one breeding pair. They sometimes will keep one or two of the pups from the prior season and then have a current litter of pups. As those pups get older, they disperse. And so I would expect that some of the coyotes here are actually coyotes that dispersed from San Francisco, because San Francisco has a number of pairs that are breeding, and they can cross the Golden Gate Bridge back up into Marin, but from a standpoint of what looks easier and more appealing to a coyote, the Golden Gate Bridge versus some of the green belts that follow 280 and other things, it seems more likely they're going to come down to the peninsula. So the more food that's here, the more coyotes you will have here. And so intentionally feeding them, as I mentioned, is illegal. It's considered harassment of wildlife. And when we talk about coexistence, one thing that happens is people sometimes say, well, I love the coyotes, I just don't want as many of them. Can you get rid of some of them? And the short answer to that question is no, you cannot get rid of them. So we kill 500,000 coyotes a year in this country, and there are still 2.5 million of them. When you think about what was essentially a war on predators during the westward expansion, we did a relatively terrible but fantastic job of eliminating mountain lions, wolves, and grizzly bears across much of this country. They tried with coyotes to do the same thing, and it didn't work, and it still doesn't work. Coyotes have a couple of adaptations that make them very resilient, and any sort of lethal removal tends to actually be counterproductive, because you take a pack that had one breeding pair, and if you split that pack, you can end up with 2 breeding pairs. So now you have more pups. And they have something called compensatory reproduction, which means when their population is under lethal pressure, they actually have larger litters of pups. So instead of having 5 or 7, they'll have 9 or 11. So in addition to the sort of ethical, humane piece of it, which I would say not to kill them, it doesn't actually work. Lethal removals don't work. And even if you eradicated every coyote that is currently here in Brisbane, if there's food here, the next batch of coyote pups coming down from San Francisco are all going to set up right here. So it's only a short-term temporary fix and not going to last. So managing coexistence is successful. Lethal removals are not. Another thing that people wonder about is coyote sounds. Coyotes make a variety of noises, yips, barks, and howls, and they can be in many different pitches from the same animal. So it's very common for 3 to 5 coyotes to sound like a dozen. So sometimes people think, oh, there must have been 12 coyotes behind my house last night, and it might be 2, right? Because they're making so many different noises, and it's one of my favorite things to hear. It's beautiful. But it does not mean that they've just made a kill or that they're on the attack. They actually mostly are communicating a sort of, hey, I'm over here, where are you? Okay, where are we all going to get together and sleep this night? And so it's a pack communication strategy. It can also be, depending on the sound, communication to other packs of coyotes of like, hey, this hillside right here, this is ours, we're already here, so keep going by, don't stop, we're here. So a couple just tips. Again, please don't feed wildlife and don't approach them. If you want to observe them, if you're lucky enough to see a coyote from a distance, you can sit quietly and watch them hunt or raise their young. It's a special thing to get to see. Domestic pets, the best thing you can do is keep your cat inside, or if it's used to being outside, you can build a catio that gives it the fresh air without it being at risk from coyotes. Keeping your dogs on leash, as I mentioned, and the pet food and water inside. Those are all other things I've mentioned. So we've talked about hazing. One of the things I just want to mention about do not run is that coyotes and many other species have a prey instinct, which gets triggered. So when something runs away from them, they immediately get the instinct to run and chase after it. So the reason we say don't run, it's particularly important for children not to run from coyotes. So when I do classroom presentations, it's one of the things I say, make themselves big. You can walk away, find an adult, but don't run, because that'll trigger the chase instinct. But making loud noises, you don't need to throw things directly at them. If you have a rock or a stick nearby, you can throw it sort of, if the coyote were directly in front of me, I would throw it to the side. They're just trying to survive. And so if you make it uncomfortable for them or you seem like a threat, they're going to want to move on. So these are the coexistence tips in summary form. And then questions. And I don't know if Ashley's going next or if I'm taking questions next.
questions from the
Yeah.
audience first. Hold on one sec. We have to.
I'm happy to leave that one up.
Okay, one sec. I need to come with the
They've got a microphone they'll bring around
so we
for
can hear
questions.
you for the recording. Thank you.
I'm not clear what hazing is. Is that the make yourself big thing?
Yes.
All that stuff? Okay.
Go away, go away. That's
Okay.
hazing.
And then another question I had was, are the coyotes here in Brisbane feasting on any of the raccoons or skunks? Would they eat them? I just don't see as many of those things around like I used to.
Very few of them will eat. The only thing I know of that generally will eat skunks is great horned owls, actually.
And we've seen them
So that
in our backyard.
So that could be what's getting the skunks. So a coyote certainly can and could take raccoons, especially juvenile raccoons, I would say. But again, if you think about this from the coyote perspective, it's about survival. So if there's an easier food source than a raccoon, which if you know what an angry raccoon looks like, that's not an easy food source. So I would be surprised if the coyotes are the source of a decrease in the population of raccoons. It's not impossible, but I would say it seems less likely. Great horned owls can also take certainly juvenile raccoons as well. I mean, they take jackrabbits. Great horned owls basically will take what they want to take for food. So that's probably more likely, but certainly the juvenile raccoons, it's possible a coyote would take, but if they can get a rabbit or a gopher or somebody's compost pile, they're going to go for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It's probably always changing, but how many coyotes do you estimate are in Brisbane? Like, is there 6 of them or 24 of them, and we're seeing the same ones over and over again?
So I am unfortunately not familiar enough with your local population here to know how many there are. Caroline, I don't know if you know.
I just know there's one that gets photographed a lot because it's got, mange probably on it. There's one that hangs out at the Crocker Park. That's probably the same one, the Crocker Park Trail one.
Yeah, I mean, what I would
And
say
then-
is they have territories, right?
Mhm.
So if there's a pack here, the pack is probably 3 to 5 individuals would be my guess, and their territory can be anywhere from 2 square miles to 30 square miles.
Oh, wow.
So I would be surprised. How many square miles is the city of Brisbane?
3. Yeah.
So I'd be surprised if you had more than 2 packs here, and probably just one. But I don't know. That's just supposition based on size.
Do they tend to sleep together at night or whenever they sleep? Do they sleep in a group?
When the pups are young, they do. But once they're adults, they'll be in vicinity, but not like coyotes and wolves are different in their socializing. And so coyotes are much more independent and individual, but they still have that social bond. So they will sleep together, but they don't always have to. And it might not be like literally tight together as opposed to like they're all in this general vicinity of this one hillside. Does that make sense?
Sure.
But with the pups, they do. That whole family unit will sleep together when the pups are young. Other questions? Yeah, we have one in the front row.
Okay.
I have a plum tree. I have several plum trees, and it was a big plum year, right? I made jam. I did all the things I'm supposed to do with the plums. And my husband was going out the next day to pull the rest of the plums down and pick them up off the ground. When he went out, there were no plums on the ground. And there were hundreds of plums that had fallen from the tree that I didn't use. Could that have been coyotes?
Absolutely. Do you have a fence?
I have a 10-foot fence, and it's got vines on it. I have a cat, and I feel like I have a very protected environment, but I don't know what happened to the plums.
Well, wildlife is a good guess. And even if you have a fence, so wildlife can go over or under fences, and coyotes are good at digging as well. And it doesn't take as big a hole as you think for them to get through. So one option is if there's a space that they got under your fence. And when they jump, the reason we advise putting something, so if the fence is like this and this is the outside edge of the fence, the overhang hangs this way so that they can't get over it. Or people put roller bars on the top because otherwise they are pretty adept at getting themselves up and over fencing. But yes, it certainly could have been coyotes. They like the fresh plums for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hundreds of plums. Anyone else have a
Anybody
question?
else have any
before
questions?
Ashley comes up. Okay, Lee.
Does it help to carry a stick or a whistle or one of those foghorn things?
Yeah, so I didn't bring one, but you don't necessarily, I mean, I don't think a stick, unless you just use it to help make yourself look bigger or more threatening. I mean, if you had a walking stick in hand, that's going to make you look bigger. But anything that's a noisemaker. So we have Project Coyote, we have these, they're like, they're not a whistle, but you blow into them, they make this hideous noise, sort of like between a screech and a horn on a whistle. Some people do carry air horns. People put rocks in like an old Coke can that you just tape shut and then you shake it, makes a horrible noise. Again, anything that just makes them go, ooh, I don't like that, and want to walk away, right? So yeah, that definitely works as part that, and that's all considered hazing, right? So hazing in this context is not like fraternity hazing. Hazing is just like make it uncomfortable for them to be around you because you seem big and scary and you might hurt them, or they just really don't like the sounds that you're making and they don't want to be around that noise anymore. Yeah.
If anyone on Zoom has a question before Sarah comes and sits down, I think we had one raised hand. Yeah, raise your hand on Zoom if you had a question, and we're going to allow you to unmute so you can ask it. So I think Lori had a question. Lori, can you unmute if you still had a question? Or maybe she... Okay, well, while Lori's thinking, we have
Thumbs up.
Carol. Okay, we're going to ask Carol to unmute in a sec.
This is reminding me of the pandemic, all the days of Zoom.
I know, we're still here in some ways. Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Hi, are coyotes nocturnal?
Coyotes are, it depends on where they're living, but they can be active at any time of day. So particularly in areas where there are not a lot of people, they can be active both day and night. And when they're feeding pups, if you think about it, the two parents are trying to feed, let's say, 7 pups. So they have to kill enough gophers, rabbits, other things to feed the 2 adults themselves, plus all those pups. And they can't do that just at night. They have to hunt all day as well, basically, to feed them. They'll nap in between. Some studies have shown that coyotes are more nocturnal when they are in urban or suburban areas, again, probably avoiding things like cars and people. But it is not a sign that a coyote is sick or rabid or aggressive just because it's seen during the day. It's not uncommon for coyotes to come out and hunt during the day.
Thank you. One more comment about the woman that in the plums. I think if you have that much of a harvest, so to speak, I think you probably should look for raccoons because they're known to denude trees, etc.
Maybe that's where your neighbor's raccoons have all got their, your raccoons are now in her yard.
Well, we get lemons.
Yeah.
One second, it'd be crazy. We get lemons, we come out and the lemons are nude.
Oh,
The rind is all gone.
that seems more like raccoons to me.
So,
than
yeah,
coyotes.
that's probably raccoons, and I don't know, they probably have a cocktail or something.
Okay, was there another question? There were 2 hands up on.
Yeah, I think Lori lowered her hand. So, okay.
Okay.
All right. I think that's
No
good
other
for
raised
now.
hands?
Unless,
Okay, anybody else in the room? I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
leaving, I'm just sitting down temporarily. So if you think of one, I can come back up. I'm just gonna turn it over to Ashley.
Okay.
And
Oh, wait, one more.
one more.
As Ashley comes up.
I'm not sure I'm clear that you're saying it could be one family that's living on this mountain, because you were saying a small or up to 20 square miles or something like that. So yeah, I'm just wondering, because it seems like, I guess my question is, how many will it take before they split themselves and move on and leave just one pack, I guess?
So the territory size is going to depend on the availability of food. So if there's enough food in the area between the mountain and the town, you could have 5 packs, right? If they all have their own territories and they have enough food in their territories to not fight over the food sources, then that's how many packs you'll have. I was supposing that given that there's just 3 square miles roughly in the city of Brisbane, that you probably had just 1 pack here was my guess. But I'm not factoring in how many could be on San Bruno Mountain, which of course could be a significant number of coyotes up there. And it's my understanding that at least at some point in the past, and perhaps still currently, there are people feeding them up there or there and in the adjacent to the city. And so that's where I'm saying you're going to have a problem with coexistence, because you get animals that are acclimated to humans being fed, and they're going to look down the hill and say, oh, look at all those people down there. Yeah. And especially as those pups disperse, even if they were born in that area on the mountain, they may very well end up coming down this direction. And if they find easy food down here, because I understand people are also feeding them apparently near one of the schools, you're going to have more coyotes there as well.
There was a lady in Bernal Heights, which is about 12 minutes from here or something like that, who was interviewed by the papers. I guess she got a big kick out of that, by the Chronicle. And she was going up on the mountain and literally sitting down in Bernal Heights, on the top of Bernal Heights, and feeding them like by hand, like throwing food out by hand. And
Yes.
she thought that was deep in some strange way. I don't know why. But all it takes is like 1 or 2 people to do something like that, and then you got a total mess on your hands.
Yeah. And I think it's, I get that. I think some people who are feeding wildlife intentionally are doing it with a desire to help, or at least the belief that they are helping. And so that's why I really emphasize a fed coyote is a dead coyote. You are hurting that animal by feeding it. And if there's an animal that you think is in distress or needs help, then contact the Peninsula Humane Society or your local wildlife rehab and let them assess whether the animal needs help. But people feeding wildlife, I mean, you go back to the Disney movies, right? There's this magical aura and this idea, it's sort of intoxicating. You're special. A wild animal trusts you. Like there's a whole psychology of why that's appealing. And, if you want to be close to wildlife, I would say you can volunteer for a great place like the Humane Society or a wildlife rehab place, and do it in a way that's helpful and not detrimental to the animals.
My name is Anke from Kings Road here in Brisbane.
Hi.
And hi, this gets me to my pet peeve, and I have been called on it several times, but people go up and leave cat food on the mountain. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether this affects the coyotes or not, and I have been on record that I disagree with this, that it's not a very nice thing, and they get on my case in big time. So whatever you do, don't get on my case.
Well, I will not get on your case. So cat food, because they're feeding a feral cat colony? Why are they putting cat food up there? There's feral cats up on the mountain?
Eat the birds, and the cats eat the birds, and then the whole balance of nature, if there is any, doubt it, but goes down the tubes.
Yeah. Feral cats are a huge population problem in the ecosystems for a variety of species, and feeding cats, sure. I mean, as I said, a coyote is opportunistic, and if there's a pile of cat food out there, that's going to be appealing to the coyote. I mean, they have the same issue down in San Jose. They have people feeding feral cats down there, and they've got a whole bunch of red foxes that come and eat all the.
That's better.
Yeah, no. None of it's really good. No? That's the problem. And even the feral cats, I mean, that's a whole other political conversation, but feeding them is not a good idea.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Okay,
but definitely that can attract coyotes, and that can support a larger population because it's a food source.
Yes.
Okay, one more question.
Right there.
Uber Eats getting delivered on the mountain. Okay, Janice on Zoom has one more question, and then we'll turn it over and let Ashley do her presentation. Go ahead, Janice.
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Yeah, so a couple of months ago, there was a wounded juvenile coyote, and I think he got hit by a car. It looked like he had those sorts of wounds. And so we saw him probably about 5 times. And I haven't seen him lately, but it was very distressing to see that. Was there anything that could be done for that poor animal?
Thank you for your kindness and compassion around that. It sounds really hard to see. I hate seeing animals that have been hit by cars, and especially juveniles. It's just heartbreaking. The issue, and I think Ashley can speak to this even better than I can, is it is very difficult to treat coyotes that are mobile. They're actually relatively difficult to capture. And so if a coyote is immobilized, is either not moving or barely moving, then it's much more likely that the local rehab will be able to come out and treat it. But if it's able to be mobile and get away, it's very difficult to trap them. They're hard to get in traps. They're smart. And darting them for a variety of reasons is a little complicated with a sedative to try and then trap them. So reporting it to the local Humane Society is probably your best bet if you see an injured coyote. But if it's mobile, they're not likely to be able to come out. And it's not that they don't want to help the animal. It's just the logistics of treating a mobile coyote are very complicated. And the truth is, as awful as it is to watch, wildlife is remarkably resilient, and so many animals that suffer from extreme cases of mange, which I hate seeing, but happens, or have, I've seen coyotes missing part of their back leg and they still have a mated pair and they're having pups and they're continuing on, and it's horrible to see, but they are remarkably resilient.
Can I give a funny story? Last, but I came in last and now least. My husband was on the deck. We have a house on Kings Road, so we're right up against San Bruno Mountain, and he was standing there just futzing about, and all of a sudden this coyote came with a dead run around him, jumped over, then he jumped 4 stories because it was rather high up, and he was being chased by a couple. Was this a nest one to stay too long with the parents or not?
So it could be, I just want to clarify, when you say being chased by a couple, you mean a couple of coyotes?
Yes,
not humans.
yes. No, by coyotes. But he hardly saw my husband. It was so quick.
Yeah, so that's usually one of 2 things. It's either a sort of sub-adult getting pushed out of the territory by its parents, or it's a territorial dispute. So the interloping coyote, the one that was running first and being chased, that one could have been one that dispersed from San Francisco and got down to San Bruno and thought, hey, this looks pretty good, and was starting to think about hanging out down here. And then the couple whose territory it was said, oh, no, you don't. You're getting out of here. You keep dispersing further south. So could have been either one.
Mm-hmm. I was worried he would break his legs, or we haven't seen any.
Yeah, well, they're pretty remarkable creatures.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Ashley now. Yeah.
Yeah. You might have noticed we had some signs put up around town that have a phone number for the Peninsula Humane Society, and that's who was referenced as the city has a contract with the County of San Mateo to take care of animal control. And so Ashley, as the wildlife rehabilitation manager at the Humane Society, can talk more about what they do and how they're raising the injured and distressed baby coyotes. And anyways, it's pretty remarkable. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. I'm the Wildlife Rehab Manager at Peninsula Humane Society. I have been with PHS since December. Prior to PHS, I was at the South Bay Wildlife Center, formerly known as Wildlife Center of Silicon Valley, and we recently merged with PHS. So we are one big happy family, and we are taking care of a lot of wild animals. So to get started, this one, up, down?
The right one. The one on the right side.
There we go. Just to introduce our wildlife program, we take in over 10,000 animals, all from San Francisco, San Mateo, and now Santa Clara County. And species include anything from small songbirds all the way up to tree squirrels, ground squirrels, and larger animals like coyotes, bobcats, and foxes. Pictured here are some wrens and a flicker up top, and then we also take care of amphibians and reptiles like our native western pond turtle, and a face only a mother can love, those darling barn owls. So we get, again, over 180 different species and over 10,000 animals a year. So we are very busy. And within those species, we take care of mammals. So we actually have a specialty to rehabilitate and release injured, sick, and orphan coyotes, foxes, and bobcats. But we will do a little emphasis on coyotes today just for the talk. I don't have as much as information as Sarah does. She's more of the coexisting and learning to live with coyotes. I just explained the rehabilitation portion if you do come across sick, injured, or orphan coyotes. So we take care of any type of age of these mammals. So I can get in a group of deemed orphan coyote pups as a neonatal stage, and we have protocols that allow us to rehabilitate and successfully release fully self-sufficient wild coyotes. We do not use any type of domesticated food or domesticated enrichment because we do not want them to become accustomed to humans. We also utilize a lot of visual barriers and feeding chutes, so they're not necessarily seeing us feed or provide them with any type of food or enrichment. When they see us, they are terrified, which is what we want. And we also rehabilitate and release roughly, depending on the year, 10 to 12 coyotes each year. As for foxes and bobcats, those numbers are a little bit different since we don't see them every year like we do coyotes. Reason for coyote intakes, of course, we have deemed orphan. So we actually do not admit any healthy wild animal if it's not deemed orphan. So something happened within that family unit. We've received coyote pups where it was confirmed that the mother was hit by a car and found on one of our local roads. Fortunately for that, somebody had trail cams set up and we were able to determine that those were actually the pups being cared for by that mom, and they were rescued. We also receive sick coyotes of all ages. Common illnesses is distemper. We also receive animals that are suspected of some type of toxin exposure. Rodenticides are a common one. And also emaciation, which is a secondary issue, whether it's from disease or some type of other illness or parasite infestation. Parasites are common in most wild animals, but sometimes, unfortunately, the immune system is severely compromised and those parasites take over, which is when we'll see mange, which is the ectoparasite, a mite that burrows underneath the surface of the skin, which is why you'll see hair, missing hair on coyotes or full-on bald coyotes, which is really, really devastating to see. I know you mentioned that a little bit, Sarah. We also have internal parasites that we'll see, such as roundworm, and of course, fleas and ticks and all those creepy crawlies that we don't want anything to do with. So when those guys do come in with those parasites, we do try to do our best to remove those from those animals by prescribed medications by our veterinarian. And of course, injured. So we also have hit by car animals. Sometimes we'll receive a coyote that was attacked by someone's dog. Those are usually juvenile or younger pups that come in. And also secondary skin infections from some of the ectoparasite infestations that we see. So like I said earlier on, we have to be very careful when we do rehabilitate mammals such as bobcats, foxes, and coyotes, because we do not want them imprinted or habituated in any way, shape, or form. So we do have set guidelines and policies that are approved by California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we do work really closely with their biologists, their game wardens, and our state coordinator to ensure we are doing the best for those animals. If for some reason we do have an animal that came in that was raised, unfortunately, by a person, those animals will be humanely euthanized. So we're not introducing habituated animals into the wild, which is another point. If you ever find an injured or orphan wildlife, coyote or any other species, it's best to contact your local rehabilitation facility where there's a permit by the Fish and Wildlife Commission or Fish and Wildlife, and also set protocols that we follow to ensure we are rehabilitating and releasing fully self-sufficient wild animals. So we are very strict on what food we offer to our patients and how we offer it to them. And we are very strict with our cleaning regimen. We will move the coyotes into a little holding pen and then enter so they can't see us to do the thorough cleaning of the enclosures. And that's when we'll provide all natural food. So we don't give dog food. We don't offer cat food. They don't get any tennis balls or anything like that. It's all natural enrichment. And you can see that's one of our juvenile coyotes in care. Oops. So we usually, since they are slower to develop, we actually have these patients in care. If they come in from a neonatal stage or juvenile stage, we'll keep them until about this time of year. I have 4 right now that are going to be released this week, which is very exciting. This time of year is, for our area, is their natural dispersal rate or dispersal time. And this is when the parents will start kicking them out and making sure that they are on their own. Time to grow up, children, and get them out of here. So what we also do to ensure that we're not releasing coyotes in heavily populated areas is we network with our fish and wildlife biologists, our game wardens, and again, our state coordinator for approval for all coyote releases. We want to make sure that carrying capacity is appropriate to introduce coyotes within that environment. And we also want to make sure that they are aware of where we are putting coyotes, just in case anything goes wrong, which it hasn't in my 25 years of doing this, so we should be okay. So next is our release. So once the coyotes show natural fear of humans, have a clean bill of health, forage for natural foods, and they are age appropriate, they get to go free back into their wild environment. And like I said, we release roughly 10 to 12 coyotes per year. And about 5 of those being pups that we've raised. The other numbers include sick or injured juveniles and adults that we'll rehabilitate and release. And these are just some release examples of our very healthy, well-fed coyotes going off into open space far, 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 far away from humans. So we also wanted to repeat that if you see anyone feeding wildlife in Brisbane, this is the phone number to contact. And I know this is a recorded Zoom, so you will definitely be able to refer to these numbers when the recording is available. Peninsula Humane Society, you can call us, but just know, like Sarah mentioned, we do not respond to any mobile coyote because it is impossible to capture them. So reporting it constantly is great, and we'll generally go out when the animal is down enough to be able to successfully capture, or we'll work with Fish and Wildlife to attempt to try to capture and keep an eye on the animal. We also work with San Francisco Animal Control, so this is their phone number as well if it's in San Francisco jurisdiction. And I also put up my email just in case you need it for anything, if you have questions about our rehabilitation program, or if you're interested in wildlife volunteering for our wildlife department. So there's lots of opportunities within our facility.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Ashley?
I assume that this is a rumor, but I have heard that San Francisco dumps, quote unquote, their coyotes on the mountain here. Would that happen?
I have no idea. We, within our permits, at least for the rehabilitation aspect, you cannot release anything within, it has to be within a certain range of 3 to 15 miles. I know that the state commission is in the process of changing that, but they should not be doing that from my understanding, but I can get clarification from them. Yeah. I haven't heard of that.
Anyone on Zoom? Oh, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second with the mic.
Sorry, you might not be able to tell us exactly, but I'm just curious, the ones that you're going to release, where that, like, is that in San Mateo County or?
No, it's Santa Clara County. So we're actually going to be releasing them out into the East Foothills on private property, up the mountain range away from people.
I think the mammals that you rehabilitate are in San Jose, the bigger animals.
Yeah, so our facility has currently 2 locations, and in the near future, we're going to add a 3rd location in Saratoga. So right now we have our Burlingame Wildlife Department, and then we have our South Bay Wildlife Department, which we recently merged with the Wildlife Center of Silicon Valley, like I mentioned. So they're located in San Jose, and we are opening a state-of-the-art wildlife rehabilitation facility in Saratoga, where all the animals will be rehabbed out of in the future. So for right now, we are keeping our Lantos and San Jose locations open for rehab, but in the future, they'll just strictly be intake facilities, and then those animals will be transported to our Saratoga site.
Great. Looks like we have a question on Zoom from Janice. Janice, we'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could make the information available, like on that last slide, there were a lot of phone numbers. Would you be able to post some of the information on the city website, or should we
Definitely. Yeah, we can post it after this workshop on the website, and maybe we can have the slides too to include on that Coyotes page as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Still have some time.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Whoa. Hold on.
Just
Okay. You thought you could sit down. Okay, Shannon, go. Yeah. Shannon, did you unmute Shannon? Okay, go ahead, Shannon.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I live over on Alvarado Street and I back up to a hill, and I have had a coyote living pretty much in the backyard for what feels like months. I can like see him from my window, and he looks very lost, like he's just by himself, and he kind of has mange. And so I was looking into who to contact, and I saw to contact Brisbane PD, but I'm not sure if that's the right source. Should I call the Humane Society, and then would they just like remove him?
Since is he mobile currently? He's able to get around.
Yeah, he moves around. He looks really sick. Like he looks like he's just covered in mange. He looks, really confused and lethargic, but he's been there for a while.
Okay, I would call Peninsula Humane Society, their main line, and you'll go through the phone tree and you can at least report it with your exact location, and continue to follow up each time you see him, or if he starts looking more and more lethargic, because our animal services will not go out if the animal is still mobile. They're very trap shy. It's difficult to get them contained. So it's important just to keep track of him and keep reporting it as much as you can. And once he is down enough, we can potentially go out to rescue him.
Okay. Is there any advice you have? Because I have a small dog that I usually take to go to the bathroom, like on the side of the property. And so it's pretty close to the coyote. So I'm a little bit worried. Do you have any like tips for maybe helping the coyote like move along, or just keeping the dog safe?
Hey, Shannon, this is Sarah. I've taken over the mic. In terms of the coyote, is it actually in your yard?
I mean, yes, I don't necessarily have a backyard, but I back up to that hillside. And so, like I said, I could see him literally from my bedroom window. So, yes.
So there's not a fence between your dog and the coyote?
There is a little bit of a fence, but I have had a coyote charge down.
You cut out there. There's a little bit of a fence, but
there is a little bit of a fence, but there have been times where I've had a coyote charge down the like side of the property where there is no gate.
Okay.
So it's a little concerning.
Yeah. So if you have a small dog and you have an area that the coyote is capable of getting into, which it sounds like you do, you don't want to let your dog outside without you also being present.
Yeah.
And it's best to try and not do that at a time when you see the coyote. I mean, the coyote is going to just be looking for food sources, right? Whatever that might be. Unfortunately, injured and sick coyotes and those that have mange or other illnesses tend to look to human provided food sources more often. It's easier for them than hunting. So I don't know if you have pet food or water that you keep out ever for your dog, but I would say not to do that, and to really try and make your yard not appealing for the coyote, and to not allow your dog outside without you being right there with it. And in terms of the coyote, I mean, you can try hazing it away from your property. It does not sound like it's a denning coyote, so you should be able to haze it away. And there's things you can get, like sprinkler systems to put on the periphery, or fox lights might bother your neighbors, but there are things that will like be motion triggered lights, so that if it's at night, to try and get it to move along and not hang out right behind where you are. But if it's a big open space, that may not be successful.
Okay. And then when you say a denning coyote, I don't know if this was a different coyote, but I did see a coyote digging in the backyard, which I'm assuming that means it was denning. Is that what you mean by denning?
No, so denning would mean having pups and raising the young.
Okay.
Coyotes do dig. They dig for food. So they'll, if they think there's a gopher, and most often they will jump to pounce on it. But sometimes after that, they'll just start digging furiously. And so that can just be in pursuit of food. That in and of itself isn't denning. If you had a pair of coyotes that kept staying in the same spot and had made a hole, that might be a future den site. But at this point in the year, most of the pups were already born, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. So you would see a hole. If they were denning back there, I would expect by now have seen and heard the young as well as the adult. And it sounds like you're only seeing the one coyote.
Yeah, I'm only seeing the adult. At one point, it looked like it was a baby, but it's since grown, I think, unless it's a different coyote now.
No, it very likely could have been a coyote that dispersed and moved into that area when it was sort of a subadult, and now it's maybe more of an adult. And so the question is whether you can encourage it to keep moving on. But you definitely should stay outside with your dog if you have your dog outside off leash.
And do you think it's safe to let my dog go to the bathroom on the side if I'm still there, or could that be attracting the coyote too if they smell the dog urine or feces?
I mean, I think that's fine. That's not. It's possible that they would be interested in it, but I don't think that's going to be attracting it the same way pet food or water would.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, we did have someone come in 2016 from Fish and Wildlife who said, don't let your dog out to use the bathroom at night without you if they're a small dog, because the coyote can come over the fence and be gone before you even realize what happened.
Yeah, just to be clear, not to let the dog outside without you, period. Not day or night. If you've got a coyote in the vicinity, you need to be outside with a small dog at all times, not just at night.
Are the diseases that the coyotes carry transmissible to dogs? Good question.
So yes, the short answer is yes, they can be. So if we're dealing with distemper or even mange, it is important to make sure that you are treating your pets for parasites. So you have to be up to date with your vaccinations for your domestic animals, and also up to date with your monthly flea and tick treatment, which is a preventative measure for any disease that these animals do carry. And I apologize for the horrible typo on this slide. We are not a human society. We are a humane society. I think my finger got
we'll
excited.
We'll fix that before we post the slide.
We'll definitely have to edit that.
Yeah. And the number for the Brisbane Police Department is there if you should see anyone feeding wildlife. Please report it to the 24/7 dispatch number so that an officer can be dispatched immediately and try and see who's doing the feeding, because that is something that we do need to work together to get under control.
Caroline, can I comment on that? Well,
sure. Yeah. Which one do you want?
Just on the reporting people who are feeding. So it's my understanding that in this jurisdiction, the officers have to actually observe the act of feeding. So you can't call it in an hour later and have anything happen. So if you see someone, especially in the vicinity of a school, dropping food for coyotes, call it in right away. So there's a chance they can get an officer out there, if not that day, the next time, and cite the person, because it's a recipe for some really unpleasant conflicts potentially. So report it promptly.
Thanks. I have a question regarding that for maybe you. Do you accept photos or videos of people who are feeding if you cannot dispatch an officer right away? Come on, sorry, put you on the spot.
That's what I'm here for. Yeah, so you can send photos, videos of people that are actively feeding people, the animals. Even if you don't see them feeding animals, you see them putting food in a particular place. If we know the time, location, that helps us out. Because like they said, we have to actually see somebody in order to cite them for it. And it is an infraction based on our city. They get fined. If they get caught again, that fine doubles. If it continues, then we can contact Fish and Wildlife, and then they can get involved. And then the process can go criminally as opposed to just civilly for a city violation. Any other questions while I'm up here? Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Perez. All right. Well, with that, there's some handouts on the back table. Feel free to bring some resources home. And again, if you haven't signed up for our blast, do that. And we're going to recap the workshop and have the recording. So please join me in thanking Sarah and Ashley again for their time this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Do I edit? Okay.
Oh, you're sure.